Hello, everybody. Just want to let you know everything is going well with me, and I hope it's going well with you. Hopefully, you've been trying to learn some things that maybe you've never taken the time to do, that you've never had time. What I'm talking about is little hobbies like maybe playing like harmonica or maybe solving a Rubik's Cube, something like that. I did that. That was during Christmas vacation. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take the time to learn how to do this. And so I did. And it's satisfying. So there's many times that I'll sit around and just kind of play with it, play with the Rubik's Cube for a while. And it's very satisfying. And you kind of pick up new things, learn different ways of solving it. And I may go ahead and make some videos showing you how to solve it, the easiest way to solve it. Not the fastest way, but the easiest way to solve it. And so I may go ahead and do that. But anyway, so you may want to try and do something like that. Learn how to draw something, for example. Whatever piques your interest. And if you could also learn to, maybe some of you are very good at this. Now, my son is not, and that would be to pick up after yourself. Okay, pick up after yourself. Your parents would very much appreciate that. And most of you are probably doing that. But that would be very beneficial if you could do that. Pick up after yourself. So clean as you go. Clean as you go. All right, well, that's right. I need to talk to you about Zoom meetings and Google Meets meetings. And well, it looks like Zoom is out. We were told not to use Zoom because of security reasons. So it's going to be Google Meets. I have to be a little more proficient on that before I want to use that. And I'm still not too sure if I am going to use that. So I just want to let you know about that. And I'll be talking to you more about grading. Remember, your grade can only increase. It cannot decrease. So the more you participate, the better you do, the higher your grade goes. So I will be letting you know more about that, about your grades. Just keep it up. Just keep trying. I'm not trying to give you too much to do, just enough to keep your mind active and remembering things that we've covered that are very important. All right? Okay, so I'll talk to you later. Go ahead and watch the videos to prepare for today's next gen lessons. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little review. One of the things that we spent a lot of time on is identifying if two things are proportional. They have a proportional relationship. And we did this by looking at tables. Okay, and then we also did this by looking at graphs. And we said, well, look, it's not proportional by looking at a graph if it's not a straight line. And not only a straight line, but it also must go through the origin. Like this does not go through the origin, whereas this one does. This is proportional. This means gallons and hours, gallons of gasoline and number of hours, they are proportional. It's a proportional relationship. Now going back to this word proportions, remember proportion is an equality of two ratios. So it's like two equations, it's like two fractions being equivalent. But actually it's ratios. And what we did to determine if they were equivalent is we could go ahead and use cross products. Now I'm going over this now because you're going to be using cross products to solve some of these problems. And now cross products, you use those to prove that two ratios are equivalent or equal, such as in this case you're proving they're equal, or you can also use them to determine an unknown value. So for example, we don't know one of the numbers, we can use cross products to figure it out. Now sometimes you can just look at it and determine what the answer is. So for example, on this one here, you could say, okay, 4 6 times something is 9, or 6 divided by... Well, look, you can't tell by looking at it. So you have to use cross products to determine that. Okay, so if I use cross products to determine this, I end up with my answers being just 6. Here's another one real quick. And if you look at, you're trying to figure out what x is. And you could look at it and tell though, because 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now, if you didn't know that, you could use cross products like this. Okay, so most of the time we're going to be using cross products today to make it easier. And okay, enough of that. Okay, so here's our first example. Don't write this in your notes, just follow along. You can always review the video. It says, this table shows a proportional relationship between the number of cups of sugar and water, used for a hummingbird food. It says, enter the number of cups of sugar used for 1 cup of water. So they wanted to figure out for 1 cup of water. So now looking at this is the same thing. I just rewrote this table. So I rewrote it, and so this is what it looks like. So they're wanting to know what it is for 1, separate this, for 1 cup of water, how much sugar for 1 cup of water? Now some of you are quick at this, you may be able to determine it looking at it right away. So by the way, a shortcut to this, just looking at it quickly, a shortcut would say, oh, notice it's 1 times 3 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 3 is 12. And something times 3 is 1. And you want to know what that something is. That's what they're asking. Okay, now I can make this into a proportion. So let's see, if I know there's 1 sugar of water, 1 sugar for every 3 waters, then how many sugar for 1 water? And hopefully that's familiar to you. When you see a 1 in the denominator, that's called a unit rate. A unit rate. And we like to use unit rates to compare things. So for example, and all you're really doing is dividing. That's all you're doing. Okay, let's go back to the problem. So we know there's 1 sugar for 3 water. How many sugars for 1 water? That's the question. You know, you could have wrote this differently too. It doesn't necessarily matter in this case. You could also just use water over sugar, right? 3 for 1, 1x. Okay, so either way it doesn't matter. So how do we solve this? Well, remember we use cross products. So I'll just use, it doesn't matter which one you use, I'll use this one right here. So what we have is 3 times x is equal to 1 times 1. Okay, so let's see. What do I do now? I go ahead, I divide by 3. That leaves x all by itself. That's what I want to do. 1 times 1 is 1. It's just 1/3. That's it. That's the answer. So our answer is 1/3 cups. Now, just to prove it to you, I could do the other side here. So we have 3 times x, right? These two right here. And 1 times 1. And we come out the same problem. So the question was, how many cups of sugar for 1 water? And the answer is 1/3. 1/3 cup of sugar. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because you have to have less sugar than water. And if there's 3 waters, it's going to be 1/3. Okay, here's our second type of problem. It says the table shows a proportional relationship between the number of cups of apples and bananas used for a smoothie. So you have apples and bananas used to make a smoothie. The question is, zoom in here. Question says, enter the number of cups of apples used for 1 cup of bananas. So for 1 cup of bananas, how many apples? Okay, you just did a problem like that before, but now this time it has fractions in there. No problem, we just divide fractions. Now when dividing fractions, we use that word reciprocal, right? And we do not divide, instead we multiply by the reciprocal. And reciprocal means you have 2 numbers whose product equals 1 are called reciprocals of each other. So for example, 5 times 1/5 is 1. 3/4 times, see I flipped it? Okay, that's all it really is. Reciprocal means just basically multiplying by flipping that fraction. Okay, and so when dividing fractions, the steps are as follows. First of all, you need to make sure everything is a fraction. So in this case, if you have a mixed number, you need to change that to a fraction. So I'll change that to a fraction. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Then I need to multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply by the reciprocal. And then you can do any division you need to do, reduce things and then multiply to get your answer. And remember when we were doing complex fractions, right? So you have this big fraction bar right there. This is just this fraction divided by that fraction. You just rewrite it like this. You rewrite it sideways. And then you can multiply by the reciprocal. Now the question is trying to figure out how much it is for 1 cup of bananas. Like if this was 1 here, what's this number going to be? And you can't really tell, right? Because I don't know what I'm going to multiply to get this one. I cannot tell. So basically it looks like this. You're trying to figure out for 1 cup of bananas, how many apples? So what we'll do is we'll set it up. We'll just make a proportion out of it. So I just said, let me just kind of zoom out a little bit so you can see it better. So I just said, okay, you have this many apples for this many bananas. How many apples for 1 banana? So hopefully that, see, I just set up just exactly the same as I did before. And you can have these switched if you want to. It doesn't really matter. You'll come up with the same answer. And because there's a 1 right here, if I use cross products, you're going to see that this number will be underneath. You're just basically just taking this and you're dividing it. So I'm rewriting this, 4 and 12 over 35 divided by this, 7 and 3/5. Okay, so again, you're not writing this down, you're just watching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply and then add, times plus, right? So I times these 2 and then I add the 12. And that gives me 152. I'll do the same here. I'll times it and I'll plus. And that gives me 38. Okay, so use a calculator if you have big numbers like this. I don't think this is one of the problems you're going to be doing. And so I chose this one because it has the largest numbers. But it'll come out nice and easy. Okay, so now I need to multiply by the reciprocal. So I multiplied by the reciprocal. All I did is flip it. Okay, now this will divide out nice and easy for us. Let's make it a little larger for you so you can see it better. And what we have here is 5 goes in here once, 5 goes in there, 7. Now 38 does go into 152. It goes in 4 times. So 38 goes in there once, and 38 goes in there 4 times. I'd use a calculator to figure that out. I said 152 divided by 38, and it's 4. So now, if you look at the answer, 4 times 1, that's 4. 7 times 1, the answer is 4 sevenths. 4 sevenths of a cup is the answer. Okay, so this is just like before, it's just fractions. And this is very large numbers on this case. Other ones you get will not be this large. Here's our third and last problem. And pretty small print here. Let's see. A drink recipe calls for punch and water. Now this equation, this one right here, excuse me, you can't see that. This one right here, which is 3, the letter P, equals 42W. In other words, 32 cups of punch is equal to 42 cups of water. So look at punch and water. This equation represents a proportional relationship between the number of milliliters of punch, the letter P, and water, letter W. Punch and water. Excuse me. Punch and water. Punch and water. Okay, so I could just write this as a ratio, and I'll just say, excuse me again, 3 cups of punch for 42 water, 3 punch for 42 water, and the question was, how much water do you need for 1 punch? For like 1 cup of punch, how much water do you need? Now I could have written it this way, or, again, it doesn't matter, you'll end up with the same results. Excuse me a second, there you go. Or, I could write it this way. So either one is okay. See that I could just flip these, it'd be the same thing. Water, punch, or punch over water, punch over water. Okay, punch over water. Oh well. So you can write this any way you wish, but notice that the units have to match. You always put the units down first to get your answers. Now, and so notice I use cross products here. Right? 3x 42 times 1. If I did it this way, it's 3x 42 times 1. See, it comes out the same. So now I'll just go ahead and what do I need to do now? Divide by x. Just zoom in on this one. I'm sorry, divide by 3. That's gone. 3 goes into 42. How many times? I think that's 14. 14 times. So the answer is 14 cups of water. 14 water. So this answer right here would be 14. So the 3 types of problems today are like this, okay? And notice that the numbers on the table are integers. It makes it fairly easy. So we could just go ahead and write it out like this, use proportions, and use cross products to find our answer. That's one problem, one type. The next type is just like this, only thing is, it has fractions involved. So it's the same thing, just fractions. So you would set it up just like this. And this is the hardest problem I just went over with you. This is the most difficult numbers. And so use a calculator when you're doing this. and your answer may end up being a fraction. And the last type was one where we have an equation like this, and so you just set it up as a proportion.